We've got picks to make this week at the 3M Open, where you're going to see a lot of golf balls in the water at TPC Twin Cities and a lot of different winners of this event over the years, different skill sets. How do we decipher who to pick this week? That's what the Golfbet Roundtable is here for. We got key stats. We're doing betting props from DraftKings, and let's start with this key stat. You might have a 36-hole comeback from the winner. In fact, 4 of the last 6 winners of this event came from behind 4 or more strokes on the winner at the cut, and it is the most comeback event of the year on the PGA Tour, dating back to 2019. No other event, Will, has had more 36-hole comebacks of 4 or more strokes than this place. Good luck making picks this week.
They call it the land of 10,000 lakes up in Minnesota. I think about 9,200 of them come into play at TPC Twin Cities. That's a big reason why we see some of the scoring variance, because no lead is safe because every hole pretty much has significant water that comes into play. So even when you think about the par 5 18th hole, you can make eagle, you can make double. There's a high variance of score options that abound. So it is interesting, especially as you look into the in-play options as we get into Friday or Saturday's third round. Maybe you want to put a little bit extra, a little sprinkle on the guys that are a few shots back.
Okay. All right. We have a lot to get to. How do you make your picks? That's what we're going to do here. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube for all your big stats and information. Interesting to note that Sam Burns started as the favorite on the odds board, but now Chris Gotterup has tied him as of Tuesday.
We're getting Chris Gotterup fever is taking on the PGA Tour. I continue to believe he's live for the Ryder Cup, depending on if he's going to be able to pop 1 or maybe 2 more finishes from here through East Lake. But this is, there have not been that many weeks in the PGA Tour where you have no Scotty and no Rory McIlroy to kind of weigh down the odds. And this is one where I feel like odds makers are having a tough time figuring out who the consensus pick should be. You see Wyndham Clark there coming off of a really good week at the Open Championship after a pretty dry summer. Max Grazerman, a runner-up here last year. And then Sam Burns, we're going to talk about what you need from tee to green at TPC Twin Cities. But Sam Burns is rolling the rock, leading the PGA Tour in strokes gained putting this season, having come so close to a victory a couple weeks ago in Canada.
And the ironic thing about Burns is when he's played his best, like at the U.S. Open, his iron game was very good, and that is the big stat this week. Of all the stats that our stat team crunched, strokes gained approach is by far the number one key stat this week that we're looking at, because you look at the last 6 years of the 3M Open, everybody except for Cameron Champ was lights out with the iron. So what does that mean to you this week?
Yeah, and Cameron Champ, is one of the most prodigious drivers of the ball. We even saw it, Vegas, Hodges, Finau the last couple of years. They are all strong drivers, but this is a more consistent differentiator in terms of what you're able to do with your good drives after that. Because as we said, there's penalty areas abound at this course, whether it's off the tee or into the green, and you've got some big targets, but you also have to be a little bit more precise with where you're putting those approach shots. So there's going to be a lot of players this week that I think are going to be able to put themselves in strong position off the tee, but the differentiator, Chris, is going to be those that are able to combine solid or really good driving with that approach play, and that's where you're able to get distance from the pack.
Yeah, this is going to be a birdie fest. 25 under par might win this. We've had years where it was lower than that, but we've had, I think, every winner going back to 2019 had every round under par. If you're shooting over par, you are probably not going to win this event because it's going to be a birdie barrage. You don't need to be the best putter on tour to win this week, but like you say, your driver's certainly going to help you. You got to keep it straight. One course comp that I saw, do you agree the course comp PGA National of Cognizant?
Yep. Yeah, I think just because of the prevalence of water and how you're able to deal with that dynamic, and it is one that, we've seen some guys that have had success at one, have had success at the other. Frankly, PGA National, I feel like it comes up as a relevant course comp about 4 or 5 different times during the year, but this week in particular, I do think that there is something to be said for being able to handle yourself mentally with just having 14, 15, 16 holes where water is in play. What do you do when you eventually hit one in the water? How easily are you able to rebound? And Chris, as you said, it's all about creating birdie opportunities. When you think back to PGA National and how it was playing 5 or 6 years ago, it was much more of a dynamic where it's a par 70 and par is a good score. You flip that on its head this week up at the 3M Open where it's a par 72 and you got to go ultra low And as you said, 20 under is probably not going to be enough to win this tournament.
Just think about your winners of this thing. Matt Wolff, bomber. Tony Finau, relatively a bomber historically.
Oh, yeah,
Cameron Champ,
he counts.
Bomber. Lee Hodges played out of his mind 1 week of his career, won this event. I think it was like 64, 65 in the first 2 days, and he won by 7 shots. And then you have, Jonathan Vegas, what he did last week. So when you're a bettor and you have a week that is so unpredictable, what do you go to the well on? What do you think about as the best way to bet on a tournament, and what your safest thing to do is?
Well, going off the nugget that you introed at the start of the show, I do think there is some merit to having a little bit more save for in-play betting this week, because we are going to see some leaderboard volatility, assuming we don't have a Lee Hodges outlier where someone just goes and races away from the field. But, I'm kind of betting on upside, where if you have 4 or 5 guys that are maybe in the middle of the pack or even skewing up closer to 100 to 1, where you think, man, I'm not really sure that they're going to have a good week, but if they have a good week, it's really going to unlock a high ceiling performance. And so that's kind of the mentality that I'm taking, where there are some players that we went through at the start of this pre-tournament favorites that feel like the safe bet. And I'm going a little bit more in a different direction and trying to target those guys that, listen, they might miss the cut, they might finish T52, but if they're able to get things to click like I think that they might be able to, the ceiling is really high.
Do some in-play betting maybe as late as Sunday and Sunday afternoon, just given how random this event can be. DraftKings has an interesting market about what the winning margin is going to be. You go back to the current name of the 3M Open. We have not seen a playoff in 6 years, which usually that kind of tells you you're due for a playoff. I know TPC Twin Cities has had playoffs in the past, but playoff right now plus 350, you're going to have a lot of unknowns, a lot of birdies, guys making charges late. I'm intrigued by that. And then it's all over the place when it comes to what the margin of victory is going to be. You want a sample size of the last 6 years. We've had a 1-shot victory twice. We've had a 2-shot victory twice. We had a 3-shot victory, and we had a 7-shot victory for Lee Hodges. So I think something like this could be fun to sprinkle some bets on this board.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this event came on as a new tournament in 2019 on the PGA Tour, so we have a 6-year sample size, not a ton, but you do have a great point there. We've never had a playoff, and I think a lot of that goes back to the dynamics of the par 5 18th hole, where it's one where you can make birdie, you can maybe even make eagle, or if you're trying to play it safe like we saw with Cameron Champ a couple years back, if you just need to make a par, you probably can make a pretty easy par. So that's where it's the chalk pick, but I do think you're more likely to land on that exact 1-shot victory, because if you have someone that is playing in one of those final groups, that they're going to be able to take that mindset of, if I need to make a birdie, I'm going to go for that green and 2, hit it over that lake that we're seeing in the background there, and potentially 2-putt for a birdie, versus if someone's trying to protect a 1-shot lead, you block out that water, you try not to think about it, and you hit 3 solid shots, leave yourself a little wedge for the 3rd shot, get out with a 5 and go sign your scorecard.
I am really glad that you agreed with my course comp of a Cognizant at PGA National, because I'm going to get right into my winner pick. The guy who shot a 59 at PGA National this year, and I think Jake Knapp, it's weird to say he's due for a win because he's only won 1 time, and if you think about it, since that win in Mexico, he hasn't been near the top of the leaderboard a whole lot, but this guy is putting has been so much better this year than you assume. When I looked it up, Jake Knapp is 12th in strokes gained putting this year. He hits it plenty long. His iron play might be the relative issue this week. That's what people are going to harp on. Are his irons good enough? I look at what he did at Cognizant. I look at how he can hit the ball and his talent level. And the fact I get this feeling that Jake Knapp's due for something big sometime soon. And this kind of course does it for me for him.
We talked earlier about high ceiling, and it's tough to get a higher ceiling than a guy that shot a 59 on a relevant course earlier this year. My question with Jake Knapp is that consistency. We saw him struggle a little bit at PGA National with backing up that opening round 59. We've seen throughout the summer he's had spurts of relevance where he's really strung together 9 or 18 or 27 really good holes. And then what do you do from there? When he won in Mexico a couple years back, it really was 4 very good rounds that he was able to string together and become a PGA Tour champion. But you're right. Listen, if he's putting like he has already this year, and he's got that smooth swing off the tee that really puts the driver in play, the piece that's going to decide if he's going to contend and factor to win this event, is going to be that iron play that we know is so important around TPC Twin Cities.
Knapp has an issue with consistency in 4 rounds. You've got 2 winners here. Thorbjornsen has some consistency issues too, but what do you like about him?
Again, we're going on upside. I like what we're seeing right now of him ripping driver over a really big tree. Maybe he's hitting towards a lake instead of over some trees. This is a guy that barely missed that playoff at the Rocket Classic, has come in with top 25s at the Deere and the ISCO over the last couple of weeks, and is one of the top players in the PGA Tour in total driving. You go back to the last 3 years, the winner of the 3M Open has been first, fifth, and first in total driving. And yes, it's an important factor from an approach play perspective, but you really also have to start with looking at the composition of the past winners we've had, and whether it's Johnny Vegas or Cameron Champ or Tony Finau, these are guys that have a lot of firepower off the tee. Thorbjornsen fits that bill as someone that I think we all expect to get a PGA Tour win at some point in the near future. Was a runner-up last year at the John Deere, again threatened earlier this year, a couple weeks ago in the 3-1-3. So getting the 35-1 price, when again, I think that odds makers are struggling to figure out what the top of this board should look like when you have a Goddard Sam Burns combo at the top. I really like 35-1 on Thorbjornsen, and someone that knows how to go low and can potentially do it again this week on a course where last year he opened with 66. We're not going to talk about the 77 in the second round. That's irrelevant. Not a piece of information we want to surface. Focus on that opening 66 and buy into the upside.
Doesn't fit the narrative. You mentioned plus 3,500. You got another winner. Will's got another winner in Tony Finau. The fact that this guy has fallen in an event like this to 35-1, all the while, Will, the way he has been playing since the Masters.
Yeah, I mean, I just think when I'm looking at this odds board, what are the chances that a Tony Finau ticket is going to be live coming into Sunday? I think it's pretty good. I don't know if he's going to definitely win, but I think that there are a lot of scenarios where Tony Finau is within 3, 4, 5 shots of the lead heading into Sunday, where you're tuning in, you're thinking you got a live one on the line, and seeing how it goes. He is the only guy in this field, or the only notable name that has played all 6 years. He has never finished worse than T28 at this event. He's a winner from 2022. He's got a couple of the top 10s. Loves this golf course for all intents and purposes, and it's one that it really seems to be fitting his game. And I've seen just enough from him over the summer. You're right. He's had a huge fall off. When you think about the Ryder Cup discussion that is starting to bubble up as we head towards the FedEx Cup playoffs, Tony Finau is nowhere near the discussion for the U.S. Ryder Cup team, having played on a couple of those teams recently. So the state of his game is not where it was in 2022 when he won here, but having made 7 straight cuts since the Masters, I feel like there's enough solid foundation of form upon which he can build and potentially have a really good week on a course that really fits his game.
So there's our winners. When we went through the prop bets this week at the PGA Tour, I personally, I don't know if you felt the same way, it was tough for me to find place markets that I liked. There's great value on a ton of top 10s, but I didn't see anybody who caught my eye as being consistent enough right now to warrant a plus 500 or whatever for a top 10. So I'm going to go. Will actually and I both have the same. Another consensus golf bet pick. A month ago I would have said it's a lock, but now we're like 0 for our last 3 after being 3 for 3 in April. April and May, we were like 3 for 3. Now we're 0 for 3. Jacob Bridgeman. We both think this. I love that this guy has sprinkled his success throughout the entire year. We were talking all about him back in April and May, these top 10 finishes. Did well again at the John Deere a few weeks ago. I believe it was a T5. Had the week off last week. He can make birdies in bunches. That's what I like about him, 3-1 for a top 20, which is great.
You mentioned that top 5 a couple weeks ago, and I think that's the key to Jacob Bridgman's season, that yes, he has not won yet on the PGA Tour, but he's really maximized his good weeks and turning what might have been a top 10 or a top 20 before into a top 5. He's got 3 top 5 finishes this year, and all of a sudden he's on the cusp of the top 30. He's very much alive for potentially factoring to make the Tour Championship at East Lake in a couple weeks, depending on how he plays through these next 2 weeks, and then into the FedEx St. Jude Championship as we get into the postseason. But you're right. I mean, it's just, he seems to be a pretty well-rounded guy who, for me, at that plus 300 for a top 20 price, again, someone who finished T19 at this event last year and has some pretty relevant form at TPC Twin Cities, just really seems to be getting the most out of his big weeks. And that, as we get into this this home stretch of the season seems to be such a differentiating factor with the guys that are comfortably in the playoff mix versus those guys that are in that 65 to 90 range and are really sweating the playoff bubble and that top 70 cutoff between this week and next week, the Wyndham Championship.
He's top 10 in putting this year, which makes it even better this week when you got to make a ton of birdies. You did find a top 10 that you like. What is it?
Yeah, come out on a limb with me here. Let's go with Kashmir Keith, plus 550. Again, a very good driver of the golf ball. Someone who has finished T5 recently at this event. I know that he's not quite on the same heater that he was on in April and May when he was finishing T8 and T12 at every event, but I like the mix of where he's at just overall in the playoff standings, knowing that a big week is going to go a long way, and then just having, again, someone that has a really high ceiling. If things click well for Keith Mitchell, who has won on the PGA Tour, who has his win at PGA National, where we just said it's a relevant course comp, so I'll add another chip to the tally for that one as well this week. And it's just a place where he's had some success before. Plus 550 is a very enticing price for me. We saw him go out, shoot a 61 in the opening round at the Truist Championship at Philly Cricket Club, and really contend over the course of 72 holes there. And maybe this getting back to Twin Cities is just enough to dial up that form once again.
First round champion, Keith Mitchell. That's been his MO, right? 60-1, by the way. I just looked it up. First round leader.
Cash the first round leader. Wait for the top 10 on Sunday. There you go.